Hello and welcome to Knife Chats, a channel where we discuss the history of cutlery as well as offer reviews on affordably priced knives for the user and collector alike. Without further ado, let's see what today's video is about. Okay, today I'm going to give you my 2 cents on how Victorinox can build a better fishing knife than what they have out there right now. I'm going to look at the 2 that were made by Wenger as well as the 2 older ones that were made by Victorinox, and then I'll tell you what I think they should be doing if they ever want to make a really good knife for the angler out there.
So I collect knives, I collect Swiss Army knives, and I fish a lot. So it only made sense that I would end up having these Swiss Army knives for fishermen, or anglers, whatever you want to call us. And what you notice with the Victorinox ones is they have a little fish on the scale, and this one, having the corkscrew, is an angler. This is an early angler, and we can tell that because it has scissors. Later on, they would add a pair of pliers to it, and then later they would remove the scissors and it would just be pliers. And the other blade that made it the angler is a fish scaling blade. This one is nicely graduated with centimeters on this side, inches on this side, and you got your little hook remover on the end here. And anyone who knows anything about fish scalers is they're not sharp at all. But so basically, originally what the fishing knife was, let me get the thing out of there, was a climber with a fish scaler at it and then the fish on the scale or on the handle. The other one they have is the Fisherman, and it has a Phillips screwdriver and also has scissors and the same hook or scaling blade and hook degorger at the end there. And so basically this is a super tinker with the fish scaling blade added to it and the little fishy design on the scale. The Wenger also came out with ones. This one is the Fisherman that's known as the Trout, and you can tell because it's got a trout on the handle here. And you have with it also a fish scaler and the degorger, and this is something to feed the line through so you can catch the hook a little easier with the degorger. But it's obviously shorter because you're dealing with an 85 millimeter knife versus a 91 millimeter knife, so the fish scaler is a little shorter. And the other one they have is the Bass, same tools. It just has your degorger in here and your fish scaler and a locking main blade, which is kind of nice. And that's the way you release the lock on the blade. But those are the 4 most common Swiss Army knives you run into for fishermen. And which one do I use when I go fishing? I don't use any of them when I go fishing. And the main reason is because these things are almost worthless these days. Yeah, you can kind of scale a fish with it, but I usually fillet fish. These blades are lousy for filleting a fish, so I don't use it for filleting. I use a fillet knife for it. And so I'm not going to be scaling anything. And as for a hook remover, unless you're really skilled with using one of these, almost any fisherman who practices catch and release is going to use a pair of pliers. The main reason they will use needle nose pliers is because you can get in there and get the hook out a whole lot safer than with this. They say that if you practice a lot, you can get really good with using these as a hook remover, but every time you're practicing, you're basically killing another fish. So most people just stick with pliers. So as a hook remover, these things kind of suck, so why would I use it for that? I don't really scale too many fish, but if you wanted to scale fish, you could, I guess, use this for it, but it's not going to work too well. And it's kind of an old-fashioned kind of scaler. They've moved on beyond that, even though even the modern Victorinox knives, fishing knives, still use this same descaler. And it's a pity because there's better ones out there. This one, on this buck fishing knife, if you notice, it's a finely serrated blade. And that's because it's not only a descaler, it's also a saw to cut through bone and cartilage on a fish, and also for removing the fins on a fish and anything else that's kind of tough on a fish for you to remove it. So you can not only scale with it, but you can also cut through bone or fish bones and cartilage and everything with it, making it a much more useful blade. And by doing that, it saves wear and tear on your main blade. And this is a blade more in line with filleting, even though this is really too stiff for most filleting also, so a regular fillet blade would work better. This one also has a locking blade. So what Victorinox knives do I take fishing with me? I take this one. I take the Outrider. It's a nice big blade. It locks, so I can use it for cutting. I would much rather have a serrated blade with me for cutting through bone and stuff, but the Outrider will do a good job with that. It doesn't have a descaler on it. I don't care about that. It does still have scissors, which is handy, but you know, a good pair of scissors, same ones that you have in the other ones actually. So that is handy for cutting line and stuff, but obviously it's not purpose built for fishing. The other Swiss Army knife I carry is an older Wenger, one of the nail clip ones, so you can actually cut line with it and stuff. If I can get these out, they're always a pain to get out, but they're worth it when you get them out. Okay, so there they are, they're out. Now I pop these open, and now I can use these to cut line, which is really helpful. And almost every fisherman will have some kind of a line cutter, you know, a pair of nail clippers for cutting line. And this was one of the older ones. Got those little scissors, but more importantly, over here, besides the file, it had a little screwdriver, which I instead sharpened up to a point so I could clean out, if we can get that to focus. So I changed the file or the screwdriver tip so that it was a point, so that I could actually dig out paint from the eyes of jigs and hooks and stuff, because they sometimes get all cluttered and with paint and stuff. So a point helps you dig out the paint, and that would be more useful on a fishing knife. So if I were Victorinox today and I was going to actually make a purpose-built fishing knife, I would start with the 111 frame because it's a good size for a fishing knife. I would not put on the scaling blade. I would instead add a bone saw to it so you can cut off cartilage and fin, and that serrated blade would save your other blade. You know, it makes a lot of sense. And I would also ditch the scissors and replace it with a multi-plate purpose blade that you find on a lot of fishing tweezers and stuff. You have your line cutting portion down here. The little hole down there is for actually cutting leads and also for cutting braid wire or braid line, which is tougher than regular line. Then you have the little plugs up here to help you cramp in your weights and stuff, and even at the end here you have something to split S-rings and stuff. So this would be a much more useful tool on a fishing knife than a pair of scissors or something, and it would be easy enough to do. And that would be actually making a purpose-built fishing knife as opposed to just taking one of your knives that are actually on the, just adding the scaling blade, which does nothing. They're kind of worthless. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. And the other thing I would do is you don't need the corkscrew. You don't need this. Instead, what you could do, well, you could have either one of those, but with your punch here, change that to something for cleaning out your fishing eyes. A nice needle point on the end of that would be much more helpful. And where was that at again? See what happens when you're not all prepared. You put something like that in the place of your sewing awl or a sewing reamer, and you're much better off when you're fishing, because you can clean out your fish eyes and everything else, and you can actually use that to help remove a hook if it's stuck inside you. So that's where I would go with a fishing knife if I were Victorinox. Put it on this size frame. Add these instead of scissors. A nice forceps with multiple uses, and then an actual serrated blade that you can use to cut bone and fin off your knife or off your fish. And you could also still use this blade for scaling. And don't even worry about the degorger portion. Anyone who's nice is going to go and use a pair of pliers anyway. Thanks for listening.
Okay, that was my 2 cents. What's your 2 cents? If you love the fish, and if you love Swiss Army knives, what would you like to see Victorinox do with its fishing knives? What kind of tools would you like to see on a fishing knife made by Victorinox? I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for visiting. If you like this video, please share it with a friend and consider subscribing to Knife Chats. To be notified of future episodes, don't forget to ring that bell. As always, your comments are welcome and insults are cheerfully ignored. Remember, you're only as sharp as your knife.